a Playlist original.
Be without fear in the face of your enemies. Safeguard the helpless, even if it leads to your death. That is your oath. Rise a knight! Rise a knight!
What becomes of us?
The world will decide. The world always decides.
A new world. A better world than has ever been seen. There, you are not what you were born, but what you have it in yourself to be. A kingdom of conscience. Peace instead of war. Love instead of hate. That is what lies at the end of Crusade.
Every day you will be a good man. What God desires is here and here.
Give me a war.
That is what I do.
Defend Jerusalem. That is your oath. The king has no need of a perfect knight.
I offer you the world.
You are a princess, and I am no lord. You have my love and my answer.
I go to pray. For what? For the strength to endure what is to come.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Back to the Blockbuster with your hosts, Gaze and Jackson. This time, another late entry to our anniversary features here. It's been a crazy time of year. We're well into summer now. As of recording, actually, it's June the 26th. Gaius and I, independently, there's so much going on in our lives. But of course, we always are keeping time away to get in our favorite watches and bring it to you guys. But this was a movie left over, an anniversary from May. So we're here to discuss today Kingdom of Heaven, which turned 20 in the year, turned 20 this year, came out in May 2005. And it was my pick for the anniversary for that month. And I think we're a little bit, just due to our schedules, a couple weeks off the watch, but still going to be a great discussion today. I think mostly about the two different cuts of this movie. Gaius having watched the director's cut, and I have a whole backstory and context I'll get into about what led to me watching the theatrical cut of this movie, and a warning to be issued to anybody that hasn't seen this movie and which cut to watch. But before we get into all that, Gaius, I'll let you step in here and share your thoughts here quickly.
So this is one of our picks from May, or your pick from May. Oddly enough, came out the same weekend that we found out when we were doing the House of Wax episode. It came out that same weekend,
Yes.
and was number one that weekend over House of Wax. However, at least the theatrical version did not fare that well critically or financially. It only made $47.4 million here in the States, but $218 worldwide, but it had a $130 million budget. So I don't think it didn't break even in theaters. I'm sure it eventually down the line made some change, from physical media. And of course they released the director's cut, which gained much more favorable reviews from critics when they finally saw that. It's a director's cut that it's a lot of minutes cut from the movie. yeah, we talk about director's cuts a lot sometimes, where it's like sometimes it feels like a cheat, where they're like, oh, there's only like 2 to 5 minutes of additional footage, and like they're like, okay, that doesn't seem like that would change the movie all that much. But in this case, this is 45 minutes of footage that was like
crazy.
that was cut from the movie. Now I can speak on 2 things. I saw, even though I don't remember a lot of it, I saw the theatrical cut in theaters a week after House of Wax because I had a friend that loved movies like this, and if I had to drag them to go see something like House of Wax, I had to go see stuff like Kingdom of Heaven. And I remember then, and I from conversations I've had with friends since, that it felt, I guess, disjointed at best is the best way to put it. Like it felt like there was a lot,
nicely. Yeah.
It felt like there was a lot missing. However, oddly enough, it felt very long, even though the director's cut is longer. There was something about like the missing like character beats and other things from the theatrical cut that somehow, I'm not sure how, made it feel like a much longer movie. Now the director's cut feels like a much fuller movie, and I think that even though it's longer, you feel a much bigger appreciation for some of the character arcs, and some of the sequences are a lot like, battle sequences are a little bit longer. There's definitely more gore, I guess, like from the battle sequences in the director's cut. Character motivations are a bit more understood in the director's cut, and it just feels like a much more fuller experience that you're invested in, that doesn't feel like a chore, if that makes sense. Like the theatrical version felt like a chore at the time when I saw it, but then when I had a friend that saw the director's cut first and kept pushing me to watch it, and I was like, no, it can't be any better. And then I was like, found out how much was deleted from it, and I was like, oh, that's a lot of movie. I mean, that's a good chunk of movie missing. So I was like,
almost
all right,
a feature-length movie just cut from the theatrical cut itself, which is, I don't know,
which is crazy.
Record out there for how like largest differential between theatrical and director's cut, but I mean that's got to be a contender. It's like, I think because we discussed this a little bit briefly, like just outside of recording, and I get the sense that we watch like 2 different movies, and I'm well enough aware that I intended to watch the director's cut. In fact, I owned it on Blu-ray, and that's kind of like a segue to like my challenges with how I watch this movie. But I learned a valuable lesson when it came to watch this, because I was very excited to watch Kingdom of Heaven. It was my pick, and it was going to be a first-time watch for me. Although I am a huge Ridley Scott fan, this is one of his movies that's kind of slipped through the cracks over the years. But I've had the copy on Blu-ray. I don't even think I had it. No, okay, it was open. I got it secondhand, which it's actually a hard one to find at like a decent price, like locally. Like, yes, I can order a Blu-ray or a 4K somewhere for like $50, but like,
it's pricey.
It is pricey, and like just not available locally where I'm at. I checked multiple spots. But yeah, I was super pumped. I knew I was going to watch the director's cut because Ridley Scott as a director is infamous for, I think, nearly all his movies. He has extended director's cuts that he swears by. And sometimes drastically, like in the case of Kingdom of Heaven, they're very different movies than what the studio sort of envisioned and had him condense.
Right.
So I knew that Kingdom of Heaven was already infamous for that. And so a couple weeks ago, when I'm throwing in this watch, I think we had planned to record sooner after we had watched, and then schedules kind of did their thing, and we had to pivot. But I threw in my Blu-ray director's cut, super pumped to get the watch in, and I have no audio coming from my TV, and so that was a red flag. So long story short, I tinkered with my Blu-ray player, my TV settings, like everything, you name it. I was scouring the web for like why this had happened. The disc itself was like in immaculate condition. I don't think it was the disc causing issues. I think it was like a hardware thing. So out of frustration, and this is the lesson that I learned, is to just be patient. I shouldn't have just put this watch off for another day. But I just said I was in the mood to watch it. I had already committed, and I spent like 40 minutes trying to navigate this audio issue. So I was determined to watch it. So I just rented the theatrical cut on like Amazon Prime, and that's still lengthy. It was like a 3.5 hour endeavor between watching the movie and
your 40 minutes trying to watch the other one.
Yeah. So I still had a 2.5 hour theatrical cut to watch. So I was like kind of frustrated before I even started the movie because I kind of just admitted defeat, and I was like, okay, I won't watch the director's cut. That'll, I'll be interested to see how that impacts the conversation that we have. And I knew very early on I had made the wrong choice. I should have been patient. I should have watched the director's cut because, like as you alluded to, this movie is very disjointed. Like there's some like almost incomprehensible at some point, at some different points, as to character motivation, like just geographically, like where the characters are in one scene and where they're at in the next scene, and who is who and their relationship to the plot. There's a lot that you can just tell is diced behind the scenes from the studio, and I could even tell while I was watching. So while I was navigating this audio issue, I had my director's cut just playing without audio on my screen. And I got like several minutes in while I was tinkering with the settings. And then when I finally gave up and watched the theatrical cut, I could already see in the first 20 minutes how much footage was not in the theatrical cut that I had just seen on my screen on the director's cut. And like a lot of interesting character stuff. So yeah, disappointing. And if anybody hasn't seen it, definitely check out the director's cut. It's not to say that it was a miserable time, but there's a lot of movie missing for sure. And I regret. And the next watch of this movie will undoubtedly be the director's cut. I'm going to track down the 4K or a Blu-ray of the director's cut and just, cut my losses. I don't know what to do with my Blu-ray that doesn't have audio because, again, I think it works. I think it's not compatible maybe with my.
Is it like a Blu-ray player thing? Yeah.
It's Sony 4K HD Blu-ray player, but anyway, the internet seemed to think that it was an audio software issue, and I haven't encountered it with any other discs, so I think that it could be just my copy. But
and I did ask him if he wanted time to watch the director's cut, and I mean, it's a commitment. It's a lot. That's even more movie to watch, and we got other movies to watch. But I was willing to like wait and like, hey, if you want to watch it, like go ahead, so you can have a much fuller experience. But he kind of was like, I don't know when I'll have the time to like dedicate even more time to watch another version of the movie.
3+ more hours. Yeah.
But then he kept going back and forth, like, oh, but I know it's like a better version of the movie that I want to talk about. But I think it does lead to a good discussion about one. I guess a big one being studio interference on projects like this. That being a big one. I know Ridley Scott was not happy with 20th Century Fox because they really wanted they wanted a Gladiator. I think that was their big thing. And like, that was a very highly successful movie, Oscar winning movie. And you could tell that is what they were aiming for. And even though it has the same aesthetic, right? It's the whole like kind of gonna be like a stand and sandal kind of thing going on there. Like as far as like the type of movie it is, they're different though in terms of like execution and characters and story. And so like for them to expect another Gladiator from this was unfair. And then, but I do want to play devil's advocate. Before I do that, do you want to tell the people what the movie is about?
Yeah,
I guess.
absolutely. Yes.
I guess the bare bones version of what the movie is about.
A big part of why I was interested in this, like beyond just Ridley Scott directing a Swords and Sandals epic, is I am a big history buff. This movie depicts a time in history that I'm not exactly familiar with. But that was something that drew me to it. It is a historical epic in nature. So, but the IMDb description says Balian of Ibelin, who's played by Orlando Bloom, he's our lead, travels to Jerusalem during the Crusades of the 12th century, and there he finds himself as a defender of the city and its people, which is a very one-sentencey description of this. I mean, essentially, yes, that is what happens, but there's so much more, so many big players in the history of Jerusalem and some of the famous battles between the crusading knights and their Muslim rivals in the 12th century. There's so much going on, some huge characters of history in this movie that are really addressed in that line. But yes, that's a little bit about what it is, and it takes place over, I think, a few years. And it's a great historical epic. But yeah, back to you on that.
Yeah, there's a lot of. I mean, I'm not as big of a history buff as you are, but it is I was really interested in the story and all that when my friend when we saw it in theaters, I was like, well, it sounds interesting. I'll be down to watch it. And I'm always, about times I'm not all too familiar with, especially during stuff like this. I'm so interested in like diving into it. But I guess playing devil as a studio, because there is a lot of story here. There's a lot of, I mean, if you get the full experience, there's a lot of character development and a lot of, depth and like a lot going on. Is it the responsibility of the studio to just let someone like Ridley Scott release a version that he wants in theaters, even though they feel like that's not going to do all that well because one is too long, one is like all the reasons that they probably had about why they want to cut down. And I guess it wasn't just about cutting scenes. He didn't really like the way the movie was marketed either, because the movie trailer wise, there's a lot of emphasis on action. Now there is action in the movie, but it's not. It's not wall to wall action. It's certainly not. And I think they want to sell it as something like that. But if you're a studio, you look at a project like this and go like, yeah, this is too long. People are going to go see it. Or do you just trust in Ridley Scott and just let him release the version that he wants to release? Because on the one hand, they have to make money. But on the other hand, you trusted someone like him to hand over a movie like this to you. You wanted a Gladiator from him. You trusted him enough to like try to provide that. But I do think it's an interesting question of what you do when you're a studio, and then what you do when you should allow someone's creative freedom to just flourish without worrying about like, I wonder if the audience will get this. I wonder if the audience won't get bored with this. There's a lot to, I guess, factor into the decision making behind why a good 45 minutes was cut from the movie.
I think it's an interesting question, and it's easy to point the finger at the studio and say, just leave it in the hands of your artist who has a proven track record like he is. Like you mentioned, he's only, at the time this was being made, he was only 4 or 5 years off of Gladiator, which is a huge box office and critical hit. So you'd think the studio should have more than 45 minutes worth of cuts worth of confidence in Ridley Scott to give them, what they wanted, which essentially was another Gladiator. He'd already given them like Alien and Blade Runner at this point. Like this guy has made massive box office performing movies of massive scale. He's proven well into his career, even in 2005. But all that to say, I do think I don't want to say that I think studios should just give sort of carte blanche to every director, because they can sort of get lost in themselves and maybe not be connecting with how audiences are going to perceive a 3 hour and 15 long movie. So do I think that studio oversight should exist? Yes, to an extent. But I think this is a case of definitely mismanagement and lack of trust, and just thinking that they're going to put out a better product than their proven director. I think that was absolutely a mistake. I don't want to sit here and say like studios should have their hands off. I mean, essentially it is their product. They're financing these movies. Like, do they have a say in the final cut? Yeah, I do think that that's fair to say, but this is just an absolute travesty of how much that they've impacted the final cut.
And it's hard to like say when they're like, well, it's $130 million of our money on the line. I mean, I get what their position on it.
They have an interest in that.
But what I don't know, and I try to look into this, it's like what came down to the decisions of what scenes to cut. If it was their decision, or if Ridley Scott had to just like, they were like pull from here, pull from that, and like it was his decision. Like it feels like most of these cuts were like some of them really kind of get rid of like really strong character motivations that would made the movie a little juicier to watch. This played by Martin Sheen, like in the director's cut, you find out that he's responsible for bearing I want to say Orlando Bloom's character's name wrong. Is it Balian, his wife, and like stealing her cross, and you find out that he's his half brother. You find that out in the director's cut, which like it adds more depth to that relationship. And instead of like it being done without much motivation at all, or it's kind of like, well, why did that happen? And I don't understand why something like that would be like cut, like, that is a strong character motivation. That's a strong that makes that character make more sense in relationship to
Absolutely.
him. And I don't know why those decisions were like made to kind of like, there's a lot of character development decisions that were trimmed down or just like cut, period. And I don't know why it came down to that. I mean, it's almost as if like it was rushed a little bit. Like the studio was kind of like, all right, we got to get this out by May 5th, 2005. So let's do what we can, and threw it in a blender. It was like, let's hope for the best. And like, that's what it kind of feels like.
That's an interesting point, and I'd like maybe you have a perspective to land on this, because I obviously at the time this came out, I was only 7. I wasn't very in the know of like movie releasing trends. I know nowadays it's nothing. It's not. It's, I mean, yes, newsworthy, but it's not rare at all for movies to be delayed and pushed back from their original release schedule. I'm wondering if in 2005, if release windows were more strictly adhered to, if delays were not as common, and if maybe that had something to do with a rushed editing process after Ridley had finished filming. Could that be, or was this still a thing at the time where movies like still kind of delayed every once in a while, or
they could be delayed every once in a while? But I wonder, but they're also, even back then, that's true of today, is if we delay it, where on the schedule can we put it that makes sense, where there's not as much competition. Now this, like we said, this movie came out against like House of Wax in early May, so like they probably felt like this was a good time to release it because there was very little competition. They probably thought they could also market it as a this kind of movie that could kick off the summer that year, even though like no one likes to be cheated when they go see a movie, and promoting this as like a kind of like wall-to-wall action experience, even though people know they were going to go see a historical drama, but it really was promoted as something that was a bit more commercial than it was. And like the theatrical cut, even I don't even think the director's cut is all that commercial either. I mean, I think that in both instances, I think if Ridley Scott thought he was making a purely commercial movie in the vein of Gladiator, like Gladiator is an anomaly to me, where that was something that was you can make like kind of historical epic like that, kind of sand and sandals picture that was pure and genuine in its motivations, like by staying true to like the material that it was trying to make, while also being entertaining to a mainstream audience. And that is not something that's easy. And I don't think that's something that's, I think it's hard to replicate. I mean, we kind of saw that with like when we talked about Troy. I mean, it's not like an easy thing to do. I don't view either cut as something that could be mainstream and that would really sell to a mass audience in the way that maybe even really Scott was expecting. Because I mean, if his director's cut was released in theaters the way as is, I still don't think the movie makes a lot of money. And I think it's because it's too long. And I think that isn't a fault for someone like me per se, but like casual moviegoer number one might be like, yeah, like how long is it? Like, yeah, I'm gonna tap out. Like I have friends that want to see F1 this weekend, and they found out how long it was, and they were like, oh, well, that they're like 2.5 hours, 2.5 hours. I think that's pushing it. So like people are still like kind of people are still like turned off by like long run times, and these kind of movies aren't for everyone either. I mean,
true,
they are predominantly like viewed by men, but like you also want to get women in there, and like they tend to not want to watch movies like this. So he would have gotten his true movie out there as he wanted it, but I don't think it would have been a mainstream success either way.
I think that's fair to say.
And then as far as like moving around, I think it kind of came down to like, okay, where can it fit on the schedule this year that makes sense? And also I think a studio really does know, even though they like make all these necessary cuts to a movie, like they still feel like we don't know if we totally have a winner. So like they are really just hoping for the best. And then what's different now compared to then though is the reaction time to not great reviews. So like 2005, there wasn't like the immediate response to social media to be like, this isn't that good, on from Thursday preview night into Friday, and that could kill word of mouth. There was still like word of mouth wasn't killed until the end of the opening weekend, right? So you were able to like
That's a good point.
kind of ride on that a bit more. But yeah, I think the studio kind of felt they had a disjointed movie, and then once reviews came out, they kind of were like, oh well, that's it. Whether or not they believe they were wrong in making those cuts because of the negative reviews, that's another story entirely. Ridley Scott is known for being blunt, and he was pretty blunt about how they treated this movie, and he hated how they treated it. They viewed it as something else than what he did, and for lack of a better way to put it, he felt that they butchered it. And
hard to argue against that. Yeah, they cut out the heart and soul of it, really.
I mean, there's like a lot of like, the character stuff is like the main issue. I mean, for me is like, I think there are a lot of the character things that don't make a lot of sense in the theatrical cut, and they get a little bit more clarity in the director's cut. And like you said, there's like a time and space issue where it feels like it just jumps around from place to place where you're just like, I told my friend that we were doing this, and I was like, well, I'm not gonna watch the theatrical cut because I'm just like, I watched this, and he was like, well, I remember it fondly because he's a big Ridley Scott fan, and he watched both. And he was just like, it really is it seems like there's just legitimately like chunks of it that feel missing, where you just go from one space to another without any real clarity at all. And and really Scott isn't known for that. And then the writer William Monahan, I mean, he wrote The Departed. I mean, this is someone that can write a screenplay. So I don't really want to put this on them. I'm putting this squarely on 20th Century Fox, but they had their decisions to make. It's a business deal for them too. At the detriment of what Ridley Scott wanted.
I'm glad you mentioned William Monahan, because while I agree, like I think again, I'll have to relay my own opinion. I'm sure I would know how I would feel on this issue, but I feel that it's still a great screenplay. The one that is the director's cut. Like, yes, I have issues with the theatrical cut, but I'm not really going to blame that on William Monahan. One thing, though, screenplay-wise, that I think is present in both. I wanted your take on what you thought is of the two main like villains of this movie, I guess, not including Saladin. The enemies on the Christian side against Orlando Bloom. I gotta look and see. I'm gonna butcher their names, but
there's a lot.
The guy that plays Sibylla's husband and the prince that becomes king after Baldwin dies, Guy de Lusignan, and Brendan Gleeson's character, who plays, where is he at here?
Renaud. Butcher that too.
Those two, I thought those were very weakly portrayed villains, not necessarily performance-wise, but in how they were written. I just wanted to know, like, were they effective villains? I actually thought that the villain in the story from like Orlando Bloom's perspective, not villain, but Saladin, the leader of the Muslims, I thought was like, I was interested and like surprised that Ridley Scott portrayed him as in a heroic sense. And I was pleasantly surprised because he didn't try to, especially considering like the geopolitical tensions at the time this movie came out, like a few years after 9/11. The Muslim community really suffered in their portrayals in Hollywood for years after that.
That's mentioned in a lot of write-ups about this movie. About even like in the time, like that's because it's not too far off from when 9/11 happened, and
exactly
he could have easily made them like I would say, I guess it would have been easy to like completely villainize them in a big way.
And I'm glad that he didn't, and I thought that was I was like, I should have had more faith in Ridley Scott, like keeping, because he's a historian himself. But that being said, like the people that are portrayed as the villains in this movie, I do think were weak spots in the movie. I don't know. I'm curious if they're handled differently in the director's cut, but I thought they were very one-dimensional and almost like cartoonish. More so Brendan Gleeson's character than Martal. I don't even know how to pronounce his last name.
So they're not handled that much more differently. I mean, they do come off very much like cartoony in both versions of the movie. And I think that's one of the issues that I have with either cut of it, is that like Gladiator has Joaquin Phoenix, like there's like a lot, there's like a real central villain that you can kind of like, And
Yeah.
that character is not cartoony. Like that is someone who is just pure evil, even though there's like a, the other side of that character is that he seems like he's just kind of whiny and like, all that stuff and spoiled, right? But but
Yes.
still his character motivations, like what he does, like you can sense like the pure evil in him. And with the villains here, like it just kind of didn't. And
That's right.
that comes down to, I think that's just a lack of character development for them. And they really don't get much better in the director's cut. And I don't want to blame like Brendan Gleeson is a great actor. I don't think it's them.
Oh
I
my
don't think it's
God.
any of that. I don't think it's the actor's
I
fault.
love Brendan Gleeson.
It's just in how they were portrayed or written. I do agree with you about that other aspect. I mean, I think it's very brave that. Maybe it's not. It was brave even in 2005 because like we weren't too far off from 9/11. I think it would have been easy for any Hollywood movie, even if they were writing a movie that was like from a particular period of time, to easily villainize like the Muslim characters like that. And they were like, oh well, this is what Americans want to see because like of the climate we were in. And I'm glad there was a little bit more nuance there rather than like just kind of doing that and going that route. I mean, that was really smart and I think intelligent and brave of him to do that.
Definitely.
And like you said, like, it should be in Ridley Scott we trust. I mean, because he is, I think,
yes,
above all else, at least in the writing stage, directing stage. Now, when it comes down to what the studio wants, when it comes to like the cut, it might not be in his total control. But as far as like the making of it and like designing characters and all that, he has a lot of control. Even if he's working with a screenwriter who wrote it and he didn't have any hand in the writing, like he's very hands-on. So like I would believe that he was hands-on and like not wanting to, one, go down a very stereotypical route with that character at all, and then by also kind of flipping expectations by not doing that. And I think that was very smart. I'm actually glad that the studio didn't try to like force that either, because like that'd be
I'm curious if that was I can see that angle was pushed in media for years after 9/11, all the ramifications after that. So I wouldn't be surprised, but I commend Ridley Scott for in how he portrays those characters in this movie. And honestly, like the dynamic between those two religions and their conflict is such an interesting part of this movie. And we don't really have, I can think of one other movie, not even really another movie that portrays this conflict in history in any meaningful way as Kingdom of Heaven does. I'd like to see more of it. Like there's the Crusades and the Christians and the Muslims at this point in history. Such fascinating content and material to explore. I think would make great limited series or series of movies. And we only have Kingdom of Heaven, it seems. I mean, maybe there's something that I'm not thinking of, but just a really rich period of history that made for a great film, I think. But
and it's like right for good drama, like the whole like religious extremism and all that stuff. Like there's a lot of like potential for and you even see it a bit in the theatrical. I mean, like that it's hard not to kind of pull drama from like a lot of these conflicts. It's just like the director Scott explores those conflicts a bit more, more detail, and gives them a bit more polish than just kind of like going over them in a very surface level kind of way. But yeah, I agree. Like, I mean, there is a lot to story wise and conflict wise just from this period of time that is so for people watching it now that feels very like Shakespearean almost, like there's like these like big conflicts between like these dueling sides that like that makes for
it does feel Shakespearean,
and then you kind of go from like in your mind like what side is right, which one's wrong, is there right on like both sides, wrong on both sides. There's a lot to kind of like dive into story wise that makes it very interesting. And I think that's what above all else someone like Ridley Scott is interested in, which is why I think he wasn't afraid to add a lot of scenes where that was much more depth with like the characters and all that too. Like he wanted a more full experience of that story and of that conflict rather than let's skip ahead to like the next battle. You know what I mean? Like I think that's what the studio wanted. Now I will say, and now this was 2005 and we've seen him continue to direct movies of this scale and of this magnitude. the battle scenes are impressive. I thought they are really well done, and that's something that's really Scott has always been good at. Even as he gets up there in years, like he's still able to construct these like really technical, well done battle sequences that seem like they would just be a lot to handle for, the youngest of directors, but he has like a really good hand on it. I also thought visually the movie was interesting. Like visually, it's a really visually arresting movie.
Absolutely.
It's just unfortunate that like the theatrical experience didn't have everything that was necessary to make it a full experience. I mean, and of course, when you see something like this, like unless you're reading the trades in 2005, you don't really know that like Ridley Scott was like, "Oh, I fought for my longer cut." Like all you know is that you got this like really short version, and you're like, "Oh, this feels not complete,
incomplete." Yeah,
all.
Exactly.
I mean, like I imagine that because like Rotten Tomatoes, I don't know if they do it now. I know it has a 40% on Rotten Tomatoes, but I don't know if subsequent reviews of the director's cut are added into that number to maybe bump it up, or if they. But I've read individual reviews of the director's cut that from people that didn't like the theatrical cut that loved the director's cut. So I almost think the director's cut should have its own separate page at this point,
right?
Because like it's honestly a totally different movie. It's like it's a completely different experience than like the theatrical cut. But I read reviews from people that didn't like the theatrical cut that loved the director's cut, and that was the version that.
Well, there's a future review for myself once I see the director's cut that'll say the exact same thing. It's not to say that I hated the theatrical cut. It's just like there's most of what's to enjoy in the theatrical cut are technical and performance critiques, I guess. Like technically, yes, the movie's great. Like it comes down to like editing, pacing, character development, and motivations. Those things are all lacking in the theatrical cut massively. But like, the movie's not shot any differently. There's the same scene compositions and stuff, and it all looks great. I think the battle sequences are great, and I'm interested to see how much longer some of them could even be in the director's cut, because that siege of Jerusalem and like the climax of the movie was a humongous sequence, and it was so great even in the theatrical cut. I feel like you could kind of detect some studio cuts in terms of like the violence and gore, but there's still like adequate amount for what you'd expect with a movie like this, with some of those battle sequences. But
what's interesting is that Orlando Bloom comes off better in the director's cut than he does in the theatrical cut. I just as a character, I mean, like, so I've taken when I was going through this, even though I don't think he's like the best in either version, but there's a lot more. I think because there's a lot more depth to that character in the director's cut. It gives it made it seem like Orlando Bloom gave a bit more, I guess, because like my issue with him in this and a lot of other stuff that he was in around this time is there is like a sameness to how he performs this stuff. Like when I'm watching this, I'm like, it's feel like kind of like how he's like stoic and reluctant hero,
yes,
much like he was in Pirates of the Caribbean, or like he's not as kind of meek and mild as he is like in Troy, but like there's like a same like Orlando Bloom seemed like he was like at this point like they were like just breeding him to just play roles like this, and it's reflected in a lot of the reviews that he got for the movie. Like a lot of people thought he was the weakest link of all the actors in the movie review wise. I was wondering what you thought of him in general while watching this, or if he's just like fine, or did you think that like when you watched this and other stuff that he did around this time, it was like, oh, he feels like a little one note? Or
you know what, I didn't mind his performance at all. I think that you could sort of tell that a movie of this scale was intended to kind of launch him into like leading man status, and it like took advantage of his popularity with some other movies he'd done recently. Like he was hot off the Lord of the Rings series, which made him big, and Pirates of the Caribbean still going on, and then Troy, where like you said, his character was a little bit different, but still like popular. I feel like as much as his performance was like serviceable, this role more than any other kind of just felt like a missed opportunity where he didn't really capitalize on all that screen time that he had and have a standout couple scenes that really showed what a leading man he could be. I still think Orlando
Yeah.
Bloom is a great and underrated actor, but you could just kind of tell that this didn't really pay off for like his career, that it didn't launch him
Yeah.
into like superstardom. I still like him, but yeah, I think does he get outperformed? Like, yeah, there's some pretty good supporting performances that are more memorable. Liam Neeson's great. Again, didn't even know he was in this movie until I threw it on, which was a pleasant surprise.
Yeah, it's easy to forget.
Yeah,
I mean, like,
yeah,
because he be in everything.
yeah, exactly. Maybe
Edward Norton.
Clueless got rid of that.
Edward Norton was another one. I was like, oh yeah, Edward Norton's in there. Like,
Yeah,
just, like,
we
it's
don't
just
see his
like,
face.
yeah. Like, yeah. This is interesting. I mean, it's a really stacked cast, and then like Eva Green doing her best eye acting. Like she reminds me of Angelina Jolie in that sense, where it's just like
Yeah.
she can do so much with a look without saying anything that you're just like captivated by her, and like she does a lot of that in this. She's another character that gets a bit more character depth in the director's cut than she does in the theatrical cut.
Speaking of which, in the theatrical cut, I cannot remember another female speaking role other than Eva Green's. I don't know if there was one.
It's kind of like as a main role, she is the
right.
role. So yeah, so like it's like I don't like there's no one else of significance.
I don't think there's even another female like character other. Yeah.
So this is a total boys club.
Yeah.
And here, and she does a great job. I actually really like her a lot in a lot of stuff that she's in. But yeah, well, with Orlando Bloom, I always wonder, and I mean, you said that you think that he's a really underrated actor. I just always wonder if he ever lived up to. It seemed like they tried to position him to be a leading man in so many things, and I just wonder if he actually lived up to that potential, because like, and that began, I guess, with Pirates of the. I won't even say Lord of the Rings. That was like a supporting role. Which I shockingly found out that he got paid very little for. I guess like none of them got paid a lot of money for that movie, like in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. But it ended up working out for them. But
God, yeah.
But you know they try to make him a thing. You can tell when they try to make certain actors a thing, and like they really did with him. And like it's interesting because like Ridley Scott is very picky about who he works with, so he thought that Orlando Bloom was that thing too, and in Orlando Bloom's face, there is like this, like he does give off, he's pretty stoic in his appearance. Like he does have that going for him.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's just because he's portrayed so many roles like this and similar-ish movies that it's hard for me to like kind of separate that sometimes, where it's like, you know, it just feels like it's more of the same. But like, I'm not saying that he's awful. I just wish I could see more from him. And now that he's not nearly as popular as he once was, I'm trying to think of like stuff that he's done that was very different from this, and I can't really think of anything off the top of my head. Like I know he was
in his later career.
I know he's in Elizabethtown with Kristen Dunst. That was like a Cameron Crowe movie, and he played like a normal everyday guy in that. But I don't even remember the movie that much. So yeah, I think he's a capable lead. Like he looks the part, but whether or not like, but when he's surrounded by like actors of this caliber, I just wonder if he gets kind of lost in how great they are too.
Yeah, I think he does get overshadowed a bit, but I still think his performance is fine. Like he's not bad by any means, but I just feel like he's just missing something in there. Especially considering all the screen time he's got in this movie, he does carry it.
Yeah. He certainly does. Yeah. And he's tasked with it. And I wonder, and like when a movie like this fails, like, unfortunately it sucks, because even though like there's no way that Orlando Bloom alone could have made this movie financially successful the way it was, but I do remember at the time that he took a hit, from it not doing that well, because like when you are the main person on the poster, you're the main person selling it. When it fails, they're gonna look to you like, oh, well, I wonder if you're part of the reason why it didn't do well. Yeah. And he did take a hit at that time when it came out and didn't perform all that well. Yeah. Because he's also attached to a bunch of franchises. Like, he was like the franchise actor. So like they were like, all right, now here's your chance to prove yourself, almost name above the title. And that didn't really happen back then with this, unfortunately.
Yeah. The supporting cast, though, I just wanted to shout out a couple names I was surprised to see because it goes pretty deep, and there's a couple like not A-listers really by any means, but some like pretty reliable supporting character actors that I love to see pop in, and some Game of Thrones alumni. Nikolai Coster-Waldau has a small role earlier in the movie. He's infamous now for playing Jaime Lannister in Game of Thrones, which my girlfriend and I are currently at the tail end of for my second time watching that show, and he is a phenomenal actor. So I didn't even know his acting career went back this far. So I was surprised to see him in there. And Kevin McKidd, who is a Scottish actor. He's known for, I think he plays Poseidon in the Percy Jackson movies, and he's in Dog Soldiers from 2002. And he voices a huge Call of Duty character, a character I grew up playing with. I love Kevin McKidd. I got a soft spot for him, so I was surprised. He's also he's one of Liam Neeson's men early on in the movie too, but I was surprised to see him. And then Alexander Siddig, who plays the Chancellor to Saladin. He is also Game of Thrones alumni in another smaller role.
Does that show just like pick British? I mean, I don't know if he's British, but they
it's mostly European actors.
The same well of European actors.
Yeah,
that's what,
a lot of Brits, but lots of like Norwegian actors as well, and Irish and Scottish actors. Yeah, there's the cast of Game of Thrones is like literally insane.
Because that Jaime Lannister actor that you named, I know him from. I've seen him in a movie called Shot Caller, which is like surprisingly.
Oh
good.
Yes, yeah.
I thought that was like I wasn't expecting much from that movie at all, and it was like really, really good. He was good in it.
He is insanely good actor.
And then my mom and other ladies will know Kevin McKidd from Grey's Anatomy. He's been on that show for
years
now.
Right. Yes. Is he still?
Yeah, he's still on it. I mean, I guess once there's like a steady paycheck, you just do it.
Yeah, definitely.
You just keep it going.
Well, I love Kevin McKidd. His voice is awesome.
Yeah, and Jeremy Irons always a reliable presence too. Like his voice alone is like always pretty he's very commanding and very real and very like you just have to listen to him. But yeah, the cast is stacked. I mean, it's a really good cast. I mean, all the technical aspects are really good. It all comes down to what the studio decided to do with it, and that's why I mean Dakota Johnson made this point when she's promoting materials. When they asked her again, but of course, like she's promoting her new movie, but they were like, "Oh, let's talk about how Madam Web flopped," and she is like, "I'm not taking ownership of that because what she signed on for was at best a much different movie than what ended up coming out." And she said, "Unfortunately, like these movies are made by committee; they're not made by creatives anymore. Like these, like kind of bigger budgeted experiences are made by business people." And people who have never directed a thing in their life, who've never written a thing in their life. So that is who is making these decisions now. And I think that happened with this movie too. It's interesting to run a studio, and like you would think some kind of
you think you need a
filmmaking experience would be a good a barometer of like this is how you have this job, but it really comes down to like a lot of these people that run these things are businessmen. They're not really. They don't have any creative bones in their body when it comes to
just
filmmaking.
Financial experience or angle, which finance is a core component in filmmaking, like without a doubt. But I think too much weight is afforded to, movies as products and how much they're going to bring back at the box office. That like their artistry plays a bigger part than studio execs realize, and what's going to gain it money. So. This is a great example, I think, of that divide.
Yeah. Are you surprised that someone of Scott's stature was even like he was told to like make all these cuts and they just didn't like trust him to just do his thing?
Yeah, a little bit. Like I'm not surprised that he needed cuts because he did make a pretty long movie and very dense, but I agree with your sentiment that I think this movie, just by nature of how large and therefore how long it really needed to be to tell a conclusive and cohesive story, wasn't going to appeal to most people. Like there's going to have its core audience for sure that love Ridley Scott and love these types of movies, but that's ultimately not everybody, and it was never destined to be a Gladiator in the sense of its box office appeal. So am I surprised? I was surprised to the extent that he was made to make cuts, but I'm not surprised in general that cuts were demanded. But yeah, nothing really surprises me. I think other than like I think Nolan is like the one guy, maybe like Tarantino and Villeneuve these days, who like aren't
Yeah.
going to be they seem to be the untouchables as far as their final products these days.
Yeah. And honestly, Ridley Scott blamed the studio and their reliance on preview audiences as to why they cut 45 minutes from the movie. They said when they previewed it, a lot of people felt it was too long, and they pointed to like specific moments that the audience preview screenings are a blessing and a curse. Like you'll have
Yeah.
people like they invite a certain demographic to them, and that they think the movie sells to, and they give you like these kind of cards, the comic cards like to write like, oh, when did you lose interest, when this happened, like when were you most excited, and they'll look at that and be like, okay, this is where they tap out, this is where they tap back in. So I think that is where they decided like this is where we should make our cuts. Even I mean, it's weird because I understand the importance of preview screenings because like you're selling it to the people eventually,
Yeah.
but a pocket of 30 or so, maybe a little bit more people, when like a movie's going to open nationwide and even more people are going to go see it, like seems like you can't really rely on that. But their idea is that like these 30 or so people represent the crowd and the demo that will see it in a mass level, so that's why they tend to listen to them. But yeah, like a movie gets bad test ratings and a studio will go out of their way to like cut it and blend it and like throw it back out again to make sure it's right.
It's an important process of the final product without a doubt, but yeah, it can definitely derail movies sometimes.
Yeah, it really can. And Scott said, honestly, it is a definitive version of the movie. And then he was asked if he was against previewing his films in general, and he said it depends on who's in the driving seat. If you got a lunatic doing my job, then you need to preview movies. But a good director should be experienced enough to judge what he thinks is correct version to go out in the cinema. So I think that's a good answer to that.
Yeah, he's confident in his own ability to make
like
a strong movie.
If you have like a mediocre director at the helm, then like preview the hell out of it. But I think they should have just trusted him. But I do think I still stand by like I don't think it would have been like a huge box office success in the States by any means.
Oh, I completely agree with you.
I mean, it's a reason why it made most of its money overseas as is.
Yeah, it does have a lot of international appeal for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a tough sell to like North American audiences.
Yeah.
It's hard to get like Chad to go out and go see Kingdom of Heaven on opening day.
Exactly.
But a good example of what could happen when there's studio interference and interfering with a director's vision, and then also how different a movie can be when like there are certain scenes that are cut. Sometimes 10 or 15 minutes can make a difference depending on where you take it from.
Yeah,
like it really can. Like I'm not a fan of those director's cuts that are promoted, and then you find out like, oh, it's like 5 minutes of extra scenes. Like I don't know, 5 minutes will really make a difference.
Yeah.
But like anything longer than that, 10, 15, 20 above it, and it's apparently where you're shaving the time from, can make a huge difference in how a movie is perceived. And I know for you, I think down the line we should kind of review the director's cut after you see it.
I would love to, and I wish I had done that in the first place, but I blame it must have been fate or something, because just didn't want to work that day, and I couldn't find in time the another copy of the director's cut. But yeah, it's absolutely high on my list to still watch. I feel like I haven't seen it yet.
Yeah, and honestly, it's probably unfair for you to grade it, because I mean, I guess you could grade the theatrical cut, but like
that's what I'll have to do. Yeah,
as a film itself, it seems almost unfair. I mean, you're really not getting the complete version of it.
No,
like well, you know what? We didn't grade Eyes Wide Shut after we watched it.
Yeah, there's a precedent there.
Yeah, I mean, like it was.
Yeah, I'm fine with grading, like us independently grading what version of the movie we saw, and it's not necessary. It's not really won't make for a comparison because we're not like comparing the same movie really. But like
Yeah,
I understand that we're grading different things in a sense, but the
exactly.
theatrical cut for me was like somewhere like I'd give it maybe like a 2.5. Like it
That's
definitely
fair.
left a lot to be desired, but not in the sense like there was still lots to enjoy about the movie in terms of like the technical stuff, like how the shot, sorry, how it was like the cinematography, the scale, and the battle sequences that are awesome. There's some good performances in there. It's period accurate. Like I love the sword and sandals epics, his
Yeah.
historical epics. They're just a lot of
Yes.
fun, and like Ridley Scott is known for making really great historical epics. I still think he crafted one. It's just the motor of that movie is missing in its
Yeah.
acts by the studio.
And
So
I think it's kind of like you can't even blame him, which I think is
no,
I
and
think
I
we
don't.
can fully agree. Yeah, like this is not like at the fault of Ridley Scott. He made his version, his complete version is a pretty good movie, and
Absolutely.
20th Century Fox's version is not. I think
Yeah,
that's what it
there
kind of
you, that's
comes
exactly.
down to. I think a 2.5 for the actual version is pretty spot on. I think your enjoyment of the director's cut will be even better than mine. Like depending on my mood when I watch it, like I want to say 3.5, but I feel like you could push it up to a 4. And it depends on like when you would
Yeah,
your mood and when you're watching it. But like
for sure.
but honestly, jumping from a 2.5 to even a 3.5 is a huge jump in terms
Yeah.
of like what in terms of what is added, and it's mostly character stuff. And like I for a lot of people, like yes, there is more violence in the movie. Like I don't know why they ended up cutting away from some of the intensity of the battle scenes in the theatrical cut, because I feel like that would be a selling point to
Yeah.
especially a lot of the men seeing it. Uh, but it's not the stuff that's added that people might think that like in a better movie, like oh, is there more action? There's more of this. It really comes down to just a better understanding of like the character motivations, and
Mhm.
and there's a better sense of time and space. There's a better sense of scenes going from scene to scene without feeling like jumpy or clunky. It really makes a big difference in that regard.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm gonna turn people off. It is more talky, but like the talky stuff is it gives the movie a lot more layers, and I think that they were important for the movie to have. So yeah, if you're expecting like more like swordplay and deaths, and that's not all that, but
Mhm.
it definitely and for people who have seen it, they know it. There's a lot more character motivations that are just much more understood in the theatrical in the director's cut
Yeah.
that actually give a lot more credence to what happens to certain characters. Like you care a bit more. There's that stuff was necessary, and to cut those character beats is unfortunate, I think.
Yeah.
Which
It's a
is why
disservice.
I don't condone looking up movies online to download them illegally. But my friend said he didn't want to buy the director's cut. It's like it's pretty. I think like a good copy of it is pretty expensive. Like if you want like
Definitely.
a really but he was like, dude, like he was like, fine, I'll just settle and like let's see if I can download the theatrical version. And he's like, when you type in Kingdom of Heaven just alone, he's like, the only thing that comes up now on those kind of sites is the director's cut. Like
Oh,
he's like, you
good.
can't like it's really even rare to find that. So kids don't download movies illegally, but if you choose to look it up, you're gonna mostly find the director's cut, which I think like in the years since it's come out has become the definitive version. And
Yeah.
at least there's that. At least there's that for Ridley Scott. Like that's the version that people have sought out more. That's the version that people see more often. That's the version that people reference. So I'll give him
Mhm.
that.
Yeah, definitely. Well, seems like he won in the end, like in terms of like which version of his movie is, the staple that people go to and recognize as the victor. So good for him. And
Yeah.
it's still I don't even know that I think this is his worst historical epic either. Like I think he's made worse. I think I'd love a comparison between this and like Napoleon from 2023.
Oh, the theatrical version of Napoleon.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Yeah, I haven't seen the director's cut.
Mm. Oh, I haven't
But
either. Yeah,
that
which
could
is
be an
available now.
interesting. Yeah.
That'd be interesting.
Yeah.
I'm waiting for The Last Duel to get its second life. I mean,
Yeah,
it
oh, I
bombed.
love that movie.
It bombed in theaters, but I just
Yeah,
wonder if
it's
like
a COVID
because
movie though.
I feel like that has like cult. It feels weird to say cult status. It's like it pretty. I'm sure the budget is pretty huge,
Yeah.
but like that movie deserves a second life. I mean, it did. Yeah, Friday came out during it opened against Halloween Kills, which made like a lot more money than that did that
Mhm.
weekend. But yeah, that movie is far better than it's given credit for. I love like the writing from like all those different perspectives. That was like a really smart
Yeah,
thing to do.
yeah.
And I don't know. I feel like that movie's day is coming eventually. Like you'll have it. It's
Mhm.
just due soon. It seems like a lot. Like really like I've heard like The Counselor, which I haven't watched it in a long time, but like It Flops by Ridley Scott has like a really
Okay.
stacked cast, but it didn't do well. Like people like have reevaluated that movie. A lot of Ridley Scott's movies get like reevaluated later on. The ones that
Yeah.
don't tend to like perform all that well. Because like he has his share of hits, but he has his share of movies that didn't do all that well when they came out that uh, tend to get a second viewing in a much more positive way.
Mhm.
And this being one of them. So, man, I wish you could have watched it the way you wanted it to, but you will eventually.
Eventually. Oh, definitely. I'll be revisiting it for sure.
Anything else you wanted to add?
We got through everything that I had to say, other than like, yeah. I mean, I wish, just to reiterate, if anybody that maybe is like listening and considering watching it, like, I implore you to watch the director's cut. I think it's ultimately a very different movie, but yeah, just a very good example of studio versus director and their different visions for a movie. I ultimately don't. I don't think I didn't regret necessarily watching it. I just regret the circumstances of what led me to. I wish I had exercised a little bit more patience in choosing what version I watched. And why is it so hard to get a good copy of the director's cut? I don't know. I'm gonna have to treat myself one day to that, because I think that is a 4K worth owning, because the movie is beautifully
Yeah.
shot and beautifully made. But
Apparently, there's
I
like
don't know.
a steelbook packaging one for that that's like really like good. Like that's I think really expensive, but
If I come across
probably
it, I would leave with it. That's for sure.
but yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, that gets us through Kingdom of Heaven. And honestly, if we have to, I mean, maybe not anytime soon, but later in the year, like we have time to like dive into the director's cut in detail, we'll do that for you guys, because I think it's fair to you, our listeners, but also to Jackson, who would probably love to like dive into this movie a lot more.
It
It's hard
would.
to dive into. It can be like it's. I mean, there are scenes that are similar, right? But there's also scenes that are shortened or elongated in different cuts of the movie that makes it hard to
Mhm.
like discuss it on the same level. But like I think there is a very good discussion to be had about the movie itself, the definitive version of it. But I think we got a good discussion out of just what it's like to have two different sides opinions
Yeah.
saying like what is the right way to release a movie and what is the wrong way, and who gets final say and who should get final say. I guess it always comes down to the studio, even if you're really Scott. But that's unfortunate, but I'm glad we got to like talk about it in general. We still have one more May anniversary for you. It's Empire Strikes Back. That is your listener's pick. Oddly enough, it will always be like the George Lucas, I guess, special editions of those movies, because that's his definitive version of it. To get like to see the Empire Strikes Back as it was when it came out, is not something that George Lucas wants for you. I know they screened like a original cut of the original print of Star Wars: A New Hope. With
Mm.
that didn't have the added special edition stuff that he added you know throughout the 2000s and all that. Some people hate that he did that. George Lucas says like these are my babies. I can add what I want, and this is the definitive version of it. So uh, you missed like the eye roll that Jackson just
Yeah.
gave.
Okay.
um, but yeah, we'll be doing The Empire Strikes Back for you guys very soon as your listeners pick, which is it's in my top 5 movies of all time. So I love that movie. I'm not like a Star Wars head at all, but that movie is perfect from start to finish. I'll just say that now.
Nice.
And then when we talk about it, we'll go into it a bit more. But we have that. We also have more. We have June anniversaries for you, even though we're on June 26th. We are doing Batman Forever, Batman Begins. And because you guys can't make up your minds, we are doing RoboCop 2 and St. Elmo's Fire, because they tied 3 times on our polls for your listeners pick. So we'll do them both. But let's not do that again, because we want to get other movies in for you
Yeah.
guys in general. But you know what? I am happy to do both. I've been wanting to rewatch St. Elmo's Fire because I actually do really enjoy it, and you get to watch a movie with your mother, so that's cool.
Yeah, exactly. Looking forward to that.
And she kindly voted for St. Elmo's Fire in our poll. She is not a RoboCop 2 person, I imagine. So
I don't think she'd even know what it is.
Yeah, she'll probably even see the first one. But yeah, we'll be covering those, and then of course, next week we have like the 4th of July weekend, all that. We'll have episodes out, but we're not gonna like pick our July ones until after we come back from the holiday and come at that fresh, because you know we still owe you these. But we're working at our own timetable. Hopefully, I think you guys are all fine with that as long as you get them. I think originally with anniversaries, we're like we have to get them out close to the anniversary date. But I'm starting to realize that doesn't really matter all that much unless it's months. We're like, if we've gone like 2 months and like, all right, we might as well just dump it at this point. But like,
I don't want to get there, but yeah,
a few weeks is fine. But yeah, in the meantime, you can listen to Back to Blockbuster or wherever you get your podcast, whether it's Good Pods, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Overcast, they're all good. But you can also listen to us at the Playlist app where you can find them in the Google Play Store or the iOS Store. They are our podcast network, and they're doing a lot of stuff for us behind the scenes that we will be able to share with you fairly shortly. You can also follow us on our YouTube page where we will be adding things more, especially when those behind the scenes changes happen. We'll be adding a bit more to that as well. It's a very exciting time for Back to the Blockbuster. We're really looking forward to it. And I did this on the episode with Mark, but I need to do it on the episode with you, Jackson. I posted it a while, I think it was last week, but on Good Pods, we were number 1 on the film review chart and the film and TV review chart. That at the same time. That's been the first time that's happened at the same time. So usually we've been number 1 on the film review chart and maybe like number 2 are in the top 5 on the film and TV chart, but we were actually number 1 on both at the same time. So thank you for listening on Good Pods, because that is the house of independent podcasting, and they really push independent shows to the forefront. And you honestly have kept us in the top 5 or top 10 on either of those film charts on Good Pods. Pretty consistently. We haven't dropped out of it. So thank you for that. It doesn't go unnoticed. We really appreciate it. And I just wanted to shout that out with Jackson. I did it with Mark on our episode yesterday, but Jackson is, permanent co-host of and not a guest. So like he's a very much a part of why the show is successful in that regard. So it's, we don't have to be number 1, but it's cool.
Yeah, it's nice. And we appreciate all the time you guys put into listening to us gab about movies. It's awesome. We love to do it. We do it for you guys. And there's so much more to come, like that Yas was saying, that we're looking forward to sharing with you guys. So stay tuned, keep listening, keep supporting, and we do it for you guys. So thanks a lot for coming back time and time again.
Until next time, guys. Peace.
Take care.